You left me for a serial liar. The first sign that my marriage was circling the drain like yesterday's coffee came on a Tuesday morning when I found my wife Collins practicing her surprised face in the bathroom mirror. Not the kind of surprise you'd expect from finding a 20-in-your-old jeans, but the theatrical shock of someone who'd just been caught doing something they'd planned all along. "What's with the Oscar audition?" I asked, adjusting my tie in the reflection behind her. Collins didn't miss a beat. "Just trying some new expressions for my presentation today." She turned to face me, her smile as genuine as a $3 bill. "You know how important body language is in HR consulting, right? And I'm the Queen of England. My name is Barnes Harper, and at 41, I've learned that life has a twisted sense of humor. I'm a mechanical engineer who spent 20 years building things that work, only to discover I'd married someone who specialized in taking things apart." Collins had always been magnetic, the kind of woman who could convince a fish to buy water. But lately, that magnetism seemed pointed in directions that didn't include me. "BNS, we need to talk tonight," she said, applying lipstick with surgical precision. "About us." Those 3 words, "about us," hit my stomach like a wrench to the gut. In 20 years of marriage, conversations that started with "about us" never ended with good news. "Sure," I said, straightening my graying beard in the mirror. "Should I pick up wine, or will this be more of a whiskey conversation?" Her laugh sounded forced. "Just be home by 7. I grabbed my coffee and headed for the door, but not before noticing her phone buzzing on the counter. The preview showed a text from Elle. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful." Well, that explained the practiced surprise face. The drive to work gave me 30 minutes to process what I'd just seen. 20 years of marriage, 2 grown daughters, and a mortgage we'd nearly paid off. Beck was finishing her psychology degree at UT Dallas, and Sylvia had just started her own event management company. Both girls had inherited Collins's charm, but thankfully my sense of loyalty, or so I thought. My phone rang as I pulled into the office parking lot. Vince Rodriguez, my old college buddy turned private investigator, had impeccable timing for someone who made a living out of other people's bad timing. "Barnes, you sound like someone stole your lunch money," Vince said without preamble. "What's he eating you?" Marriage advice from a guy who's been divorced 3 times. I'll pass. "Hey, that makes me an expert in what doesn't work." "Spill it." I told him about the text, the mirror practice, and the ominous talk scheduled for tonight. Vince listened without interrupting, which meant he was either taking notes or playing solitaire. "You want my professional opinion?" he finally asked. "Do I have a choice?" "She's cheating. The question is whether you want to know details or just the highlights." The rest of my workday passed in a blur of Katie drawings and stress calculations. Ironic how I could calculate the exact stress point where steel would fail. But I'd completely missed the fracture points in my own marriage. At 6:30, I sat in my car outside our house in the upscale Dallas suburb. We'd called home for 15 years. The place looked picture perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn, 2-story colonial, white picket fence that we'd painted together 3 summers ago. But perfect facades had a way of hiding ugly truths. Collins was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of our leather sofa like she was ready to bolt. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, her approachable outfit for difficult conversations. "Barnes, sit down," she said, patting the cushion beside her. I remained standing. "I think I'll take this one vertical." "Thanks." She sighed, the sound of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "This isn't working anymore. We both know it." "Define this." "Our marriage. We've grown apart. We want different things now." I nodded slowly. "And what you want happens to go by the initial L." Her practice surprise face made its debut. "What are you talking about?" "The text this morning. Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful." Either you're getting sweet messages from our mortgage company or someone's been keeping you busy. Collins's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something I'd never seen before. Relief. She was glad to be caught. "His name is Lance," she said quietly. "Lance Morrison. We met at the Hartley Foundation charity dinner 3 months ago." Lance Morrison. I knew that name. Real estate developer, married, drove a matte black Range Rover that screamed midlife crisis from 3 blocks away. He had been in the local business journal last month talking about his latest strip mall project like he was designing the sign chapel. Married Lance Morrison? I asked. He's separated. Colin said quickly, has been for months. Separated like we're about to be separated, or separated like my wife doesn't understand me separated. She stood up, her composure cracking. Don't be sarcastic, Barnes. This is hard enough. Hard for who? You've had 3 months to get used to the idea. I've had 3 minutes. My phone buzzed. A text from Beck. Dad, can you pick me up from campus? Car won't start. Perfect timing. I grabbed my keys. We'll finish this later. I told Collins. I'm picking up our daughter. You remember her, right? One of the people this affects besides you and Lance. The drive to UT Dallas gave me time to think, which was probably dangerous. Beck was waiting outside the psychology building, looking every inch the graduate student in her oversized sweater and thick-rimmed glasses. She slid into the passenger seat with the fluid grace of someone who'd inherited the best of both parents. Thanks for the rescue, Dad. You look terrible. Your mother and I are getting divorced. Beck blinked once, processed the information with the clinical detachment of her psychology training, then reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Dad, but honestly, I'm not surprised. Care to elaborate on that? Mom's been different lately. Distracted. Happy in a way that didn't include the rest of us. Beck studied my face. There's someone else, isn't there? Lance Morrison, the real estate guy. Dad, his wife, Marlene, is in my abnormal psych class. She mentioned her husband's been working late a lot lately. Even my daughter knew more about my wife's affair than I did. The thought should have been humiliating, but instead it felt oddly liberating. If everyone could see what I'd been blind to, then maybe I wasn't losing my mind. What do you need from me? Beck asked. Just be my daughter. Don't take sides. This is between your mother and me and Lance Morrison. Especially Lance Morrison. We drove home in comfortable silence, but as we pulled into the driveway, I noticed Collins's car was gone. A note on the kitchen counter explained everything. Gone to think. Back tomorrow. We'll talk then. See. Beck read the note over my shoulder. Well, that's not ominous at all. I opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents like they held the secrets of the universe. Want to order pizza and watch something mindless? Can we make it Chinese food and something violent? Deal. As we waited for our General Tso's chicken, I realized something important. For the first time in months, I felt relaxed in my own house. No walking on eggshells, no wondering what mood Collins would be in. No pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Maybe this divorce thing wouldn't be so bad after all. That optimism lasted exactly 12 hours. Collins returned the next morning with the kind of determined energy that usually preceded major life changes, like rearranging furniture or ending marriages. She'd brought coffee from that expensive place downtown, which meant she either felt guilty or wanted something big. We need to discuss logistics, she announced, setting a latte in front of me like a peace offer. Logistics, right. Like who gets custody of the coffee maker? Barnes, please. I'm trying to be civilized about this. I took a sip of the latte. It was perfect, which somehow made everything worse. Okay, let's be civilized. You're leaving me for Lance Morrison, who may or may not actually be separated from his wife. What's the plan? Colin sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast for 15 years, helped the girls with homework, and planned family vacations. Now, we were planning the end of everything. I've already talked to a lawyer, she said. We can do this amicably. Split everything 50-50ths. Joint custody of the girls even though they're adults and you've already talked to a lawyer. I sat down the latte harder than necessary. When exactly did this conversation happen? Yesterday afternoon. So, while I was picking up our daughter and processing the fact that my marriage was over, you were downtown planning its funeral. Her jaw tightened. I'm trying to be practical and I'm trying to be human. Forgive me if I need more than 24 hours to adjust to my new reality. My phone rang. Sylvia's name appeared on the screen and I realized Beck had probably filled her in on yesterday's revelation. Dad. Sylvia's voice carried that careful tone she used when dealing with difficult event planning clients. Beck told me about Mom. Are you okay? I'm having coffee with your mother and discussing the division of our worldly possessions. So peachy. I'm coming over. Sylvia, you don't need to. I'm coming over. She repeated and hung up. Collins looked annoyed. You told the girls. Beck figured it out on her own. Apparently, everyone knew about your affair except me. It's not an affair. Collins snapped. We're separated. We weren't separated when it started. She had no answer for that, which was answer enough. Sylvia arrived 20 minutes later, still in her work clothes from whatever early morning event she'd been coordinating. She hugged me first, then gave Collins a look that could have frozen the Gulf of Mexico. Mom, what the heck? Language, Sylvia, language. You're worried about language. Dad, have you eaten anything? I gestured to the untouched latte. Liquid breakfast. Sylvia opened our refrigerator with the efficiency of someone who had inherited my practical nature and Collins's organizational skills. You need real food, Mom. You need to explain yourself. I don't owe anyone an explanation, Collins said. But her voice lacked conviction. You owe Dad 20 years of explanations, Sylvia shot back, cracking eggs into a pan. You owe Beck and me an explanation for why you're blowing up our family for some real estate developer with a midlife crisis car. You don't understand. I understand that Lance Morrison is married to Marlene Morrison, who hired me to plan their anniversary party next month. So, either he's the world's most optimistic separated man, or you're the other woman. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of eggs hitting hot butter. Collins looked like she'd been slapped and I felt a surge of pride in my younger daughter's directness. The anniversary party was cancelled, Collins said quietly. When? Last week. Sylvia flipped at the eggs with more force than necessary. So, he left his wife for you or you helped him decide to leave his wife? It's complicated. It's really not. I said it's actually pretty simple. You fell for someone else, decided our marriage was over, and now you want to divide up 20 years like we're splitting a restaurant check. Collins stood up abruptly. I can't do this right now. I'm staying at Tarara's until we figure things out. Tara, Collins's best friend since college, the kind of woman who collected other people's secrets like vintage wine. If Collins was staying with Tara, then Tara knew everything. Had probably known for months. Give Tara my regards, I said. And thank her for keeping me in the loop. After Collins left, Sylvia slid a plate of perfectly scrambled eggs in front of me. Eat. Then we're going to figure out how to handle this. Handle what? Your mother's made her choice. I'm not talking about Mom. I'm talking about Lance Morrison. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. At 25, Sylvia had inherited Collins's beauty, but my stubborn streak. She was already planning something and that something probably wasn't going to end well for Lance Morrison. Sylvia, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking that Lance Morrison is about to discover that messing with our family has consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Vince. Heard through the grapevine about Collins. Want me to do some digging on Loverboy? I showed the text to Sylvia, who smiled for the first time since arriving. Tell him yes, she said. And tell him I'm paying. I typed back, dig away. Bill me. Vince's response was immediate. Already started. You're going to love what I found. 2 hours later, Vince arrived at my house with a folder thick enough to choke a horse and the satisfied expression of a man who'd struck gold. Lance Morrison, he announced, dropping the folder on my kitchen table. Real estate developer, married 15 years, 2 kids in private school, and a gambling problem that would make Vegas nervous. Sylvia leaned forward. Gambling problem. Poker games in the back room at Mickey's bar every Thursday night. High stakes cash only. He's into some very unfriendly people for about 50 grand. I opened the folder and found photographs of Lance entering a downtown bar, credit reports showing mounting debt, and bank statements that painted a picture of financial desperation. There's more, Vince continued. Marlene Morrison filed for legal separation 2 weeks ago, not months. And she's not being quiet about why. Meaning she hired her own private investigator and has photos of Lance with Collins at the Angeles Hotel last Tuesday afternoon. Sylvia whistled low. So Mom's not the only one he's cheating with. Gets better, Vince said, pulling out another set of photos. Meet Jennifer Walsh, Lance's secretary, and Amanda Price, his real estate partner's wife. Your wife's boyfriend has been busy. I stared at the photographs, feeling something shift inside me. Not jealousy. I was past that. Not even anger exactly. More like the cold satisfaction of an engineer who'd finally identified the point of structural failure. What do you want me to do with this? I asked Vince. That depends. How civilized do you want to keep things? Sylvia leaned back in her chair. Dad, remember when I was 16 and Tommy Garrett cheated on me at prom? You had his car towed from the dance and left him stranded in his tuxedo and he never bothered me again. She smiled. Sometimes civilized is overrated. My phone rang. Collins's name on the screen. Barnes, we need to meet tomorrow. My lawyer wants to go over the preliminary paperwork. Your lawyer can wait, I said. I haven't hired one yet. What's taking so long? I looked at the folder of evidence spread across my kitchen table, at my daughter's determined face, at Vince's expectant grin. I'm still gathering information, I told Collins, making sure I understand exactly what I'm dealing with. It's not complicated, Barnes. We split everything and move on. You're right, I said. It's not complicated at all. After I hung up, Sylvia raised her coffee mug in a mock toast. To keeping things simple, to keeping things interesting, Vince corrected. I raised my own mug. To making sure Lance Morrison understands exactly what he's gotten himself into. The game, as they say, was afoot. The thing about revenge is that it requires patience, planning, and a complete lack of conscience about other people's feelings. Fortunately, 20 years of marriage had taught me patience. Engineering had taught me planning, and Collins's betrayal had taken care of the conscience issue. Vince and I spent the next morning conducting what he called field research and I called stalking with a purpose. We followed Lance from his downtown office to his usual lunch spot, a trendy bistro where he apparently conducted business meetings that looked suspiciously like dates. There, Vince pointed through his camera's telephoto lens. Table 12. That's not Collins. I squinted across the restaurant patio. Lance sat across from a blonde woman who definitely wasn't my wife. Unless Collins had undergone some serious cosmetic surgery overnight. That would be Jennifer Walsh, Vince confirmed, snapping photos. His secretary. Notice how she's leaning in. That's not discussing quarterly reports body language. How can you tell? 20 years of divorce cases, my friend. I can spot an affair from 3 blocks away. We watched Lance pay the check, then follow Jennifer to the parking garage. They didn't emerge for 45 minutes. And when they did, Jennifer's hair looked like she'd been through a wind tunnel. Busy guy, I observed. Busier than he should be, considering he's supposedly in love with your wife. My phone buzzed with a text from Collins. Having dinner with Lance tonight. Don't wait up. I showed the message to Vince, who shook his head. She has no idea what she's gotten herself into. Neither does he. That evening, while Collins was presumably enjoying romantic dinner conversation with Dallas's busiest cheater, I had dinner with my daughters at their favorite Mexican restaurant. Beck had driven down from campus and Sylvia had cleared her evening schedule. Both looked like they were planning something. Dad, Beck began carefully. We've been talking. That's usually dangerous. We want to help, Sylvia said with the Lance Morrison situation. There is no Lance Morrison situation. There's a divorce situation and I'm handling it. Beck leaned forward. Did you know that Marlene Morrison is in my abnormal psychology class? You mentioned that. What I didn't mention is that she's been talking a lot about Lance's gambling, his affairs, and his financial problems. Sylvia pulled out her phone. And I've been doing some research of my own. Guess. Who's been trying to book private event spaces for business meetings that last exactly 2 hours? Lance Morrison. Lance Morrison. 3 different venues, always the same pattern. 2-hour blocks, cash payment, request for rooms with privacy and discretion. I sat down my beer. You two need to stay out of this. We're already in it, Beck said. Mom made us part of it when she decided to blow up in our family. Besides, Marlene Morrison wants to meet you. Absolutely not. Dad, Sylvia said patiently. Marlene has information you need. She also has a lawyer who specializes in high-asset divorces involving adultery. And she has photographs, Beck added. Lots of photographs. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a coffee shop near campus, waiting for Marlene Morrison to arrive. I'd expected someone bitter and broken, maybe crying into a tissue while lamenting her failed marriage. Instead, Marlene Morrison turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s who looked like she could run a Fortune 500 company before lunch and still have energy left to conquer a small country. Mr. Harper, she said, sitting down with the efficiency of someone who didn't waste time on pleasantries. I understand we have a mutual problem. Lance Morrison. Lance Morrison. She opened a leather portfolio and slid a photograph across the table taken last Tuesday at the Agilis Hotel. The photo showed Lance and Collins entering a hotel room. Collins laughing at something Lance had said. They looked happy, carefree, like people who didn't have spouses and responsibilities and 20 years of marriage to consider. There are more, Marlene said. But I think you get the idea. What do you want? I asked. I want Lance to understand that actions have consequences. I want him to lose everything he's taken from me. His reputation, his business relationships, his financial security, and his ability to charm his way out of trouble. Beck and Sylvia exchanged glances. This was their kind of woman. What did you have in mind? Sylvia asked. Marlene smiled, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. Lance has been using our joint credit cards to finance his affairs, hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gifts for his various girlfriends. He thinks I don't know, but I've been documenting everything. She pulled out another folder, this one containing credit card statements, receipts, and bank records. He's also been borrowing money from our home equity line to cover his gambling debts. Without my knowledge or consent, that's fraud, Beck observed. That's leverage, Marlene corrected. Lance is going to discover that leaving me was the most expensive mistake of his life. I studied the woman across from me. Why are you sharing this with me? Because your wife isn't Lance's only affair, and she's not going to be his last. He's using her the same way he used Jennifer Walsh, Amanda Price, and at least 3 other women I've identified. She slid one more photograph across the table. This one showed Lance with a brunette I didn't recognize. Taken at what looked like a hotel bar. This was taken yesterday, Marlene said. While your wife thought she was having an exclusive relationship with my husband, the coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. I looked at my daughters, both watching me with expressions of concern and determination. What do you want from me? I asked Marlene. Cooperation. Lance has made both of us look like fools. But we don't have to stay fools. We can make sure he pays for what he's done. Sylvia leaned forward. What kind of cooperation? Marlene's smile widened. The kind that ensures Lance Morrison learns that some mistakes are too expensive to recover from. An hour later, we sat in my kitchen while Marlene spread out a plan that would have impressed a military strategist. She'd been preparing for this moment for months, documenting Lance's every move, building a case that would destroy him financially and socially. The gambling debts are the key, she explained. Lance owes money to people who don't accept payment plans. When his income disappears, they're going to come looking for their money. And his income disappears, how? I asked. Real estate development depends on reputation and relationships. Lance's business partners are all family men, conservative types who don't appreciate adultery and gambling. When they find out what he's been doing, Beck nodded approvingly. Social destruction. Financial destruction, Sylvia added. My favorite kind. Marlene looked at me. The question is, what do you want to happen to your wife? I thought about Collins, probably at Tarara's house right now, planning her new life with a man who was cheating on her the same way he'd cheated on his wife. Part of me wanted to warn her, to save her from the humiliation that was coming. But a larger part of me remembered 20 years of marriage, 2 daughters who deserved better than a mother who'd throw away their family for a serial cheater, and the cold dismissal in Collins's voice when she'd announced our marriage was over. "I want her to understand exactly what she's chosen," I said finally. Marlene nodded. "Then we're going to get along just fine." My phone buzzed with a text from Collins. "Staying at Tarara's again tonight. We'll talk tomorrow about the lawyer meeting." I showed the message to the group. "Tomorrow's going to be very interesting," Marlene observed. "Tomorrow," I corrected. "Lance Morrison is going to discover that some games have rules he doesn't understand." And Collins was about to learn that the men she'd left me for wasn't worth the 20 years she'd thrown away. The beauty of a well-executed plan is that it unfolds with the precision of a Swiss watch. The ugly truth about revenge is that it requires you to become someone you never thought you'd be. By Thursday morning, I was discovering I had a talent for both. Marlene's plan kicked off at exactly 9 a.m. when her divorce attorney served Lance with papers at his office. Not regular divorce papers, the kind that included detailed financial disclosures, fraud allegations, and a request for immediate asset freezing. Vince called me with updates every hour. 9:15, Lance tried calling Marlene straight to voicemail. 9:30, Lance called his lawyer. Lawyers in court all day. 9:45, Lance called Collins. She's apparently in meetings, according to Tara. 10 a.m. Lance is pacing his office like a caged tiger. I was in my own office trying to concentrate on structural calculations while my life imploded in the most satisfying way possible. My phone rang at 10:30. Barnes. Collins's voice sounded strained. "We need to talk now. I thought we were talking tomorrow with your lawyer. Something's happened. Lance, there's been a misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Can you meet me at Tarara's, please?" Tara's house sat in the kind of neighborhood where everyone had opinions about their neighbor's lawn care and marriage choices. I'd been there dozens of times over the years, suffering through dinner parties where Tara held court with the latest gossip while her husband retreated to his workshop. Collins met me at the door, looking like she hadn't slept. Behind her, I could see Tara hovering with the eager expression of someone who smelled drama. "Barnes, thank God," Collins said, leading me to the living room. "Lance's wife has lost her mind. She's filed these crazy papers claiming fraud and adultery." "And adultery?" I interrupted. "That's crazy. What would make her think that?" Collins shot me a sharp look. "She has photographs of us together." "Well, that would explain the adultery allegations." Tara finally spoke up. "Barnes, this isn't the time for sarcasm. Collins needs support right now, does she?" "'Cause it seems like Collins made her choices pretty clearly." My phone buzzed with a text from Vince. Lance just left his office heading toward Tarara's neighborhood. ETA 10 minutes. Perfect timing. "Collins," I said. "There's something you should know about Lance." "What now?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photographs Vince had taken of Lance with Jennifer Walsh. Collins stared at the images, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally understanding. "When were these taken?" she asked quietly. "Tuesday. While you thought you were having an exclusive relationship." Tara leaned over Collins's shoulder to look at the photos. "Oh, honey," she said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely surprised. "There are more," I continued, swiping through images of Lance with Amanda Price, with the brunette from the hotel bar, with 2 other women I hadn't bothered to identify. Collins sank into Tarara's overstead sofa. He said he'd never felt this way about anyone before. I'm sure he's never felt that way about anyone before, at least not since last week. A car door slammed outside. Through the window, I could see Lance's matte black Range Rover parked at an angle that suggested he'd been in a hurry. "That's Lance," Collins said, jumping up. "I need to talk to him." "Actually," I said, "I think we all need to talk to him." Lance burst through Tarara's front door without knocking, his usual polished appearance replaced by the frantic energy of a man whose world was collapsing. He stopped short when he saw me. "What the heck is he doing here?" Lance demanded. "Nice to see you, too, Lance," I said. Collins was just showing me some interesting photographs. Lance's eyes darted to Collins, who was still holding my phone. "Collins, baby, Whatever he's told you. Is Jennifer Walsh a business associate? Collins interrupted. Lance's face went through several expressions before settling on defensive anger. Jennifer is my secretary. We have business meetings, 45-minute meetings in parking garages. Collins, you don't understand. My wife has hired investigators to follow me. She's trying to make innocent business relationships look like something they're not. Tara snorted. Business relationships, right? And Amanda Price, I asked, what kind of business do you conduct with your partner's wife? Lance turned to face me fully, and I could see the moment he decided to go on the offensive. You know what your problem is, Barnes. You can't accept that Collins chose me over you. Actually, my problem is that Collins chose a serial cheater with gambling debts and fraud charges. Gambling debts? Collins looked between Lance and me. What gambling debts? Lance's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. $50,000 to some very unfriendly people, I continued. Plus the money you've been stealing from your joint accounts with Marlene and pay for hotel rooms and gifts for your various girlfriends. I haven't stolen anything. Tarara's husband appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Everything okay in here? Just getting to know Collins's boyfriend better, I said. Did you know he's been using his wife's credit cards to finance his affairs? Lance stepped closer to me, his face flushed with anger. You need to shut your mouth. Or what? You'll have me beaten up by the same people you owe 50 grand to. Barnes, Collins said sharply. Stop it. Stop what? Telling the truth. Your boyfriend is a cheater, a gambler, and a thief, and you left me for him. Lance's hands clenched into fists. I said, shut up. Make me. What happened next unfolded with the kind of slow-motion clarity that comes with adrenaline and 20 years of suppressed anger. Lance swung at me, a wild haymaker that telegraphed itself from 3 counties away. I stepped aside, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling into Tarara's coffee table. He went down hard, scattering magazines and knocking over a vase of flowers. When he tried to get up, I was standing over him. Stay down, Lance, I said quietly. You're embarrassing yourself. He stayed down. Collins stared at both of us like she'd never seen either of us before. Barnes, what has gotten into you? Clarity. I said, 20 years of marriage, and I finally have clarity. My phone rang. Sylvia's name on the screen. Dad, are you at Tara's house? Yes. Good. Turn on Channel 8 News now. Tara grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news station. A reporter stood outside Lance's office building, microphone in hand. Allegations of fraud and adultery have rocked the Dallas real estate community. Lance Morrison, whose development company has been involved in several high-profile projects, is facing serious charges filed by his arraigned wife. The camera cut to footage of Lance entering his office building that morning, then to file photos of his various development projects. Morrison's business partners have declined to comment, but sources close to the company suggest they were unaware of the allegations until today. Lance struggled to his feet, staring at the television. This is impossible. How did the media find out? I looked at Collins, who was watching her boyfriend's public destruction with growing horror. Collins, I said gently. This is who you left me for. A man who's been lying to everyone in his life, including you. She didn't answer, but tears were starting to form in her eyes. Lance grabbed his keys from where they'd fallen. I have to go. I have to fix this. Lance, Collins called after him, but he was already heading for the door. Collins, baby, I'll call you later. This is all just a misunderstanding. The door slammed behind him, leaving the 4 of us in Tarara's living room with the sound of the news report filling the silence. Well, Tara said finally, that was dramatic. Collins turned to me, her face a mixture of anger and confusion. You planned this? All of it. I didn't plan anything, I said truthfully. I just decided to stop being the only person in Dallas who didn't know what Lance Morrison really was. You destroyed him. No, Collins. Lance Morrison destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone else found out about it. My phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. Phase 1 complete. Ready for phase 2? I looked at Collins, sitting in her best friend's living room, watching her new relationship collapse on live television. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part remembered 20 years of marriage and 2 daughters who deserve better than a mother who'd throw away their family for a serial cheater. Collins, I said, we still need to talk about that lawyer meeting. I can't deal with this right now. Unfortunately, Lance Morrison's problems are about to become your problems, unless you want to reconsider some of your recent decisions. She looked up at me, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. What do you mean? I smiled, but it wasn't a particularly warm expression. I mean, Lance Morrison's story is just getting started, and you need to decide whether you want to be part of the ending. Outside, Lance's Range Rover peeled out of Tarara's driveway with the desperation of a man who was finally beginning to understand the consequences of his choices. The game, as they say, was just getting interesting.